during that run. The Lynx, during their now 10-game win streak, they didn't really beat anybody either. The best team that they beat, the New York Liberty as well. So these teams going head-to-head today was really the first time they both faced some competition outside of the New York Liberty. So whose streak is going to stay alive? And unfortunately for us, as I've said numerous times, when we go up against a good team, the disparity in coaching is going to rear its ugly head. And the disparity coaching today reared its ugly head.
Stephanie White watched in absolute horror as her entire game plan disintegrated in real time. It wasn't just a loss, it was a public dismantling of her coaching authority by the very players she was supposed to lead. Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell didn't just play basketball, they took over the floor in a way that made the sidelines look completely irrelevant. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, as the scoreboard told a story of talent overcoming a broken system. This was the night the hierarchy shifted, and everyone saw it happen live on national television.
In coaching is going to rear its ugly head. And the disparity coaching today reared its ugly head. How, you may ask? Too much Aaliyah Boston facilitating. Get your big old booty on the block, post up, do some post moves, score around the rim, and grab us some rebounds. Set Caitlin Clark some screens, and finish around the rim. That's all we need from you, AB. Stephanie White, we don't need her being a hub and stopping right next to CC instead of setting CC a screen, just stopping right in front of her and calling for the ball. Hey, Caitlin.
The Minnesota Lynx were on a war path, riding a massive winning streak. But nobody expected the Indiana Fever to show up with this level of internal friction. While the Lynx looked like a well-oiled machine, the Fever sideline was a portrait of frustration and misconnection. Stephanie White's strategy of using the post as the primary offensive hub backfired so spectacularly, it felt like a deliberate protest from the backcourt. Mitchell and Clark weren't just hunting for buckets, they were fighting against a system that seemed designed to hold them back. And the results were explosive.
Though this was a close game within 10-12 points for the most part, I never felt like this was even an actual close game as far as competition goes. I never felt like we actually had a chance to beat the Minnesota Lynx today. You know, we would come within 8, nah, whatever. We'd come within 4, nah, whatever. We'd come 10, nah, we just don't. It just seemed like we were outmatched. Not bad enough to get destroyed, but not good enough to make a real run to where the Lynx felt threatened. As soon as the Lynx felt threatened, boom, timeout, pedal back to the metal.
Kelsey Mitchell was playing like a woman possessed, dropping a staggering 37 points that should have guaranteed a victory under any normal circumstances. She went 14 for 21 from the field, hitting 6 massive threes that kept the Fever within striking distance despite the defensive collapse. But instead of the bench celebrating this historic performance, there was a visible chill coming from the coaching staff. It was hero ball at its finest, or perhaps its most desperate, as Mitchell realized the pre-game sets were leading them straight into a brick wall and decided to take over herself.
I'm just not going to make that point today. Caitlin Clark, 19 points for Caitlin Clark, 10 assists, 8 for 18 from the field, 2 for 9 from 3. Now, it says Caitlin Clark shot 18 field goals. Oddly enough, watching it, it didn't feel like she was aggressive enough to me. It didn't feel like she was aggressive enough to me. It didn't feel like she was hunting her shots as much as I would want to see her hunt her shots today. I mean, she ended up taking 18, so maybe it was just my perception of what happened. But it didn't feel like she was out for blood. Like, I wanted Caitlin Clark to come in this game smelling blood in the water. You know? 2 for 9 from...
Then you have Caitlin Clark, who managed to pull off another double-double with 19 points and 10 assists while dealing with a coaching staff that wouldn't let her loose. The frustration on Clark's face was unmistakable. Every time she was forced to hand the ball off to a stationary post player, she was being hounded and harassed by the Lynx defense all night, but the real resistance seemed to be coming from her own bench. Every time she tried to push the pace, a bizarre substitution or a forced play call would drag the momentum back down to 0, leaving her visibly fuming.
but they're also going to get tons of defensive rebounds because AB is hovering outside by the paint for most of these. We got out-rebounded 33-23 today. Out-rebounded by 10. And a large part of that is because AB is hanging out by the three-point line and not aggressive enough on the defensive side, crashing the glass. We need double-digit boards from AB. I'm sorry. We need double-digit boards. Sophie Cunningham, only 3 points. 2 shot attempts for Sophie Cunningham today. Timpson, 7 points.
The disparity in coaching became the elephant in the room as the game slipped away in the second half. While Cheryl Reeve was making surgical adjustments for the Lynx, Stephanie White appeared to be stuck in a tactical loop that simply wasn't working. The gap between the two benches was a chasm that no amount of individual brilliance from Clark or Mitchell could bridge. It was a humbling reminder that, in the big leagues, talent can keep you in the game, but bad leadership will eventually cost you the win. The humiliation wasn't just in the score, it was in the total lack of answers.
Was this Stephanie White's worst coached game? No. We've seen a lot more piss-poor performances from Stephanie White as a head coach than today's game. But this just highlights how she doesn't measure up to the league's best. Let's take a look at some highlights, shall we? You have Caitlin Clark with the midi over Olivia Miles. Boom, taking it, protecting the ball. Shield, shield, shield. Step back right over Olivia Miles. Nice. Nice work, nice work. Caitlin Clark begins the second quarter with the 3. See, AB with the ball again. It's just too much. AB had the ball too much today.
One of the most glaring issues was the way the frontcourt was being utilized on the floor, which left fans and analysts scratching their heads. Instead of dominating the paint and crashing the boards, the bigs were being asked to facilitate from the perimeter like they were guards. This left the Fever completely exposed on the glass, getting out-rebounded 33-23 in a display that was painful to watch. Having your star center hovering by the three-point line while the opponent grabs offensive rebound after offensive rebound is a recipe for a coaching disaster that cannot be ignored.
In the face, and somehow this is a foul on Sophie Cunningham. Yeah, I shit you not. Sophie Cunningham gets elbowed in the face, and they somehow call this a foul on Sophie Cunningham. The worst part is, these dummies, these stooge referees, reviewed this play too, and still came to the conclusion that the foul is on Sophie Cunningham. You can't make this up. Shout out to Venom over there. Go subscribe. Venom Reacts. Breaking it down when it comes to AB.
Island, right? Aaliyah Boston, instead of coming to screen, she's calling for the ball.
Exactly. And I don't want to take too much of this clip, but that's exactly what
The visual of the post players refusing to set effective screens for Caitlin Clark was perhaps the most shocking moment of the entire broadcast. Instead of creating space for the league's most dangerous shooter, players were stopping right in her path and demanding the ball. It looked like a total breakdown in communication, or worse, a complete disregard for the basic fundamentals of the offense. When your bigs are actively clogging the lane for your guards, you know the coaching staff has lost control of the locker room. It was a blatant display of a broken system failing its stars.
Watching AB be the hub. One thing can be true. The second thing that's true, AB, use some common sense. You have basketball IQ, right? I don't want to insult you and say you don't have you have basketball IQ? Then you should know better. Get out the way or set a screen. Those are your two options. Get out the way or set a screen so Caitlin Clark can set you up for an easy finish around the rim. Your best games come when CC's setting you up. One more time, AB. Your best games come when CC is setting you up. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. That means so much to me. Don't worry, we're going to be cooking.
Stephanie White's insistence on this specific offensive flow seemed to cause more friction than points on the board. There is a growing sense that she is more married to her rigid system than to the actual success and strengths of her players. And that's where the humiliation starts to set in. When a coach values their vision over the reality of a 37-point explosion from a player like Mitchell, the roster starts to tune out. You could see the disconnect in every timeout and every dead ball situation, as the players looked everywhere but at the coach's clipboard during the huddle. The defensive side of the ball was an even bigger nightmare, with the Lynx getting absolutely anything they wanted in the paint and on the perimeter. There was zero resistance, no physical pushback, and a complete lack of defensive rotations that left the Fever guards hanging out to dry. It's one thing to lose to a better team, but it's another to look like you haven't even practiced a basic defensive shell drill in weeks. The Minnesota offense scored 28 points in the second quarter alone, effectively ending the contest before the halftime show even began for the fans. Even when the Fever managed to cut the lead down to single digits, the feeling of an actual comeback was non-existent. Every time they threatened to make it a game, the Lynx would simply call a timeout, regroup, and immediately push the lead back out to double digits. It felt like a cat playing with a mouse, and the mouse had a coach who was trying to teach it how to walk backward. The level of frustration on the Indiana bench was peaking, with Stephanie White looking increasingly isolated as her star players took matters into their own hands to keep the score respectable. We have to talk about the refereeing because it reached a level of absurdity that you rarely see in professional sports. Sophie Cunningham took an elbow directly to the face in a play that should have been an easy flagrant foul on the opposition. Instead, after a long and tedious video review, the officials somehow decided that the foul was actually on Cunningham herself. It was a baffling decision that left the entire arena in a state of shock and further fueled the narrative that the Fever are playing against more than just the 5 players wearing the opposing jerseys. That specific call against Cunningham felt like a turning point for the team's morale, as if the universe itself was conspiring against them. To get hit in the face and then be penalized for it is the ultimate insult, and it mirrored the frustration of the entire night. While the referees were busy making questionable calls, the coaching staff was failing to provide any emotional support or tactical pushback. It was a moment where a strong coach would have taken a technical foul to defend their player. But the silence from the sideline was deafening, and quite telling of the situation. Caitlin Clark's aggressiveness was another major talking point, as she seemed to be playing with a leash around her neck for most of the night. Despite taking 18 shots, it never felt like she was truly hunting for her bucket the way we've seen in her most dominant performances. She was being passive in moments where she should have been out for blood, likely due to the confusing directives coming from the bench. When your generational talent is looking to pass to a center standing at the top of the key instead of shooting, something is fundamentally broken in the plan. The fact that Clark only attempted 1 free throw the entire game tells you everything you need to know about the lack of aggression and the lack of respect from the officials. She was being hand-checked and bumped on almost every possession, yet, the whistles remained silent while the Lynx enjoyed a much more favorable environment. But you can't blame the refs for everything when your own coach is putting you in positions where you simply can't succeed. The humiliation was a multi-layered cake, and the coaching decisions were the main ingredients that ruined the flavor. Kelsey Mitchell's scoring streak is now at 14 straight games with 20 or more points, a feat that should be the headline of every sports show in the country. Yet, in the context of this loss, it feels like a hollow statistic because it wasn't integrated into a winning strategy. Mitchell was essentially forced to play one-on-one because the structured offense was so stagnant and predictable. It's a testament to her incredible skill that she could drop 37 against an elite defense while her own team system was seemingly working against her every step of the way. The rebounding numbers were the final nail in the coffin, showing a team that has completely lost its physical identity under the current leadership. Getting out-rebounded by 10 is unacceptable for a roster that features elite size and athleticism in the frontcourt. But when your primary rebounders are being told to play like perimeter facilitators, you lose that physical edge. The team needs to be crashing the defensive glass with a ferocity we just didn't see tonight. And that responsibility falls directly on the shoulders of the coaching staff to demand that level of effort. There is a growing sentiment among the fan base that a massive lineup change is desperately needed to save the season from spiraling out of control. Many are calling for a starting 5 that maximizes floor spacing and defensive grit rather than clinging to outdated roles. Michaela Timpson has been a revelation off the bench, playing with a level of energy and menace that the starters seem to be lacking in these big games. If the coaching staff refuses to adapt and put their best players in a position to win, the humiliation and the losses will only continue to pile up. Stephanie White's post-game reactions have done little to calm the storm, as she continues to defend a system that is clearly not producing wins against top-tier competition. There is a fine line between being confident in your philosophy and being stubbornly blind to the results on the court. Watching Mitchell and Clark carry the team on their backs while the coach tries to force an outdated hub offense is like watching someone try to tow a supercar with a slow tractor. It's slow, it's painful, and it's a direct insult to the elite machinery involved in the game. The Minnesota Lynx, led by a brilliant coaching performance by Cheryl Reeve, didn't even have to break a sweat to maintain their lead throughout the night. They knew exactly where the Fever's weaknesses were, and they exploited them with surgical precision. They didn't feel threatened because they knew the Indiana offense would eventually stall out under the weight of its own confusion. Every time Clark or Mitchell hit a big shot, the Lynx responded with a structured play that resulted in an easy bucket, highlighting the massive gap in execution on the floor. Even the small details, like the choice of inbound plays and late-game substitutions, pointed toward a coaching staff that was completely outmatched by the moment. There was a brief moment where Caitlin Clark threw a beautiful three-quarter court dime to Monique Billings, showing what happens when the team actually plays with pace and vision. But those moments were few and far between, quickly replaced by the slow sets that brought everything back to a crawl. It's hard to win in the modern era when you're actively choosing to play a style that belongs in a different decade. The controversy surrounding the coaching has reached a fever pitch, with rumors of locker room tension starting to leak into the public consciousness after every game. You can only humiliate and restrict elite players for so long before they start to demand changes. And we are seeing the early stages of that friction right now. Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark are a backcourt duo that should be terrifying the rest of the league, not struggling to overcome their own sidelines. The shocking loss wasn't the scoreline, it was the realization that the team is being held back. As the season progresses, the pressure on Stephanie White is only going to intensify with every single loss against a quality opponent. It's one thing to beat the bottom dwellers of the league, but when you go up against a powerhouse like the Lynx, the cracks in the system become massive canyons. The players have shown they have the talent to compete with anyone on the planet. But talent alone isn't enough to win a championship. They need a visionary leader who can harness that energy instead of trying to box it into a flawed and restrictive system that prioritizes ego. Ultimately, this game was a wake-up call for the entire Indiana organization, and a reminder that the window for success is much smaller than it looks. You cannot waste the prime years of talent like Clark and Mitchell by failing to provide them with the tactical support they deserve. The humiliation on the court tonight was a loud signal that change isn't just an option, it's a necessity if this team ever wants to be more than a highlight reel for losing efforts. The question now is whether the front office has the courage to act before the star players decide they've had enough.